Welcome to the Ricefield Archive. This time, we turn from short stories to a new author and to a novel. First published in Hanoi in 1936, Dumb Luck by Vu Trong Pung is a biting satire of life under French colonial rule, a world obsessed with status, westernization, and the appearance of civilization. We begin with Chapter 1, Red-Haired Xuan's romantic fortune, min plus van equals van min, civilization, Madame Deputy Duan's compassion. Content note: this chapter includes brief, non-graphic references to coercive behavior, unwanted advances, voyeuristic conduct, and period-specific colonial language. And so, the novel begins. It was around 3 o'clock on a Thursday afternoon. Inside the tennis club, screened from the outside by dense rows of clipped shrubs, only the court on the right was in use. 2 Frenchmen were playing, while 2 small boys listlessly ran after the balls for them. Their shirts soaked with sweat, the 2 men played with all the enthusiasm of athletes forced into exercise against their will. 5-4, 5-6. These cries mingled with the hollow popping of the tennis balls, keeping time with the music of tens of thousands of cicadas. Out on the pavement, a lemonade seller sat astride the shaft of his cart, chatting with a fellow tradesman. Strange, it's Thursday, and the place is dead. They'll come later, won't they? It's only just after 3. Starting today, they'll be training in earnest. They'll probably practice every day now, not only Thursdays, Saturdays, and Sundays. Really? How do you know? Have you forgotten? His Majesty is coming here in 3 or 4 months. There'll be a magnificent cup at stake this time. All those ladies and gentlemen will be training until they cough up bile. Under the shade of a silk cotton tree, an elderly fortune teller sat calmly contemplating his wooden box, inkstone, stick of red pigment, brush holder, and several sample astrological charts. Every now and then, he yawned like a true philosopher. 10 paces away, Red-Haired Xuan was enjoying an intimate conversation with a young sugarcane seller. Was it commerce? No, it was a love affair, or, to use the language favored by journalists, a romance of the common people, with capital letters. Red-Haired Xuan kept lunging forward, reaching out as though determined to seize love by force. Stop playing hard to get just a little bit, the tiniest little bit. You're disgusting. A little flirting won't wear you away. True enough. And chastity won't get you painted red and placed on an altar either. But listen, who is waiting for that fate of yours? Who dreams so fondly of your love? My goods have been sitting here unsold all day. You won't buy anything, yet all you do is paw at me. Red-Haired Xuan sprang to his feet and announced with heroic indignation, I don't need it. The sugarcane seller cast him a long, insolent glare. If you don't need it, why don't you piss off back inside? Xuan laughed with a shrill whinny and sat down again. I was only joking. If I didn't need what you've got, what the hell would you need me for? Come on, stop putting on airs. Give me a penny's worth. Oh, certainly. Money first. Let me see it. From the back pocket of his trousers, Xuan pulled out a handkerchief tied into a knot shaped like a pig's ear. He undid it and slapped a silver dime down upon the cement tiles with a magnificently heroic clang. While the girl picked up a cleaver and began shaving the skin from a stalk of sugar cane, Xuan babbled on, congratulating himself. 5 dimes, and now I've still got 2 left. Spent 3 dimes last night. Had to entertain a friend properly, didn't I? 2 dimes for a promenade ticket at the theater, then 5 pennies for a bowl of rare beef po. That's how a gentleman should live. Even a pampered young master couldn't do better. It's all this generous spending, that'll be the death of me. I've told you to come and live with me and take charge so I can stop wasting money, but you never listen." The sugarcane seller said nothing. Juan chewed noisily, then spat the fibers at a lamppost. At last, he wiped his hands on his trousers, stood up and stretched. The girl held out 9 pennies in change. He clasped both hands behind his back and refused to take it. "Put it in my trouser pocket for me. Go on, stick your hand in." Annoyed, the girl dropped the money on the ground. Juan was therefore obliged to bend down and pick it up himself. No sense of fun at all. Alas, how the silence of an autumn night awakens sorrow in the heart of the melancholy traveler. Singing a few lines from a southern Kailuang opera, he minced over to the fortune teller. For some time, he stood staring at the old man like a country bumpkin seeing the monkey cage at Madame Beatty's menagerie for the first time. Then he shouted, "Tell my fortune." The old man instantly awoke from his doze. He pulled the writing brush from behind his ear with a speed worthy of a policeman writing out a fine. "2 dimes. 2 dimes for a chart. Take it or leave it." "1 dime. A cheap customer's better than no customer." "All right then. Put down the money." "I'll put it down. It's not as though I need it." Juan sat on the mat and placed a dime on the lid of the wooden box. The fortune teller took out a sheet of traditional paper and began grinding the ink. After spitting several times into the inkstone, he raised his brush. "Your date and hour of birth?" 25 years old, old man. 15th day of the 10th month, at the hour when the chickens go to roost." The fortune teller bent low over the mat. He muttered calculations under his breath, counting them off on his fingers before putting brush to paper. Juan clasped his arms around his knees and rested his chin on one wrist. As he wrote, the old man began to chant, "The twin barriers stand across your path. Calamity and the void preside over body and faith." Then, in the sing-song voice of his profession, he recited, "When yin and yang find the gateway barred, father and mother have long joined the immortals. If the hour you gave me is correct, you must have lost your parents very young." Exactly right. Your early years were filled with hardship. Excellent. But this is not an altogether unfortunate horoscope. He studied the chart again and intoned, "When mourning and emptiness meet in the houses of the rat and the horse, a man's name shall one day resound throughout the length and breadth of the land. You are destined to rise to considerable rank." "Good. When?" "Your fortune begins to turn from this very year." "I haven't seen any sign of it." "You will before the year is out. And what has favored me since the beginning of the year?" "So far, only the star of romance." "What does that mean?" "It means you'll have remarkable luck with women." Red-haired Juan clapped his hands as loudly as he did whenever he saw the tennis players make a particularly fine shot. Then he boasted, "Amazing, absolutely amazing. Last night, when the theater let out, I passed through Sam Kong Alley. 3 or 4 women came rushing out, surrounded me, grabbed my hands and pulled at my clothes. They were mad with passion. I surrender to your wisdom, master." Turning around, he called threateningly to the sugarcane seller, "You'd better take note." Then, lowering his voice, he said to the fortune teller, "Even the sugarcane girl is almost ready to give in. Don't think she isn't. Your predictions are worth every coin." At that moment, a large motor car with a pointed bonnet and pointed rear stopped outside the tennis club. The door opened. A woman in her late 40s climbed heavily and laboriously out of the car. Her clothes were more coquettish than those of any young girl. Her broad face was loaded with powder and rouge. Her hair was jet black and tightly curled. She must have weighed at least 70 kilograms, yet the fashionable little scarf wound around her head was absurdly tiny, no more than a short scrap of cloth. In one hand, she carried a miniature parasol and an enormous leather handbag. In the other, she cradled a strange little dog that resembled a mythical unicorn. Next came a lanky young man, gaunt and hollow-cheeked, with a protruding Adam's apple, eyes like stuffed snails, and hair that had also been curled. Dressed in a European traveling suit, he crawled out of the car and offered his hand to a young woman who emerged last. She wore white shorts, her hair tied in a bun, rubber shoes on her feet, and 2 tennis rackets beneath one arm. The three of them strolled leisurely into the club. Absorbed in hearing his fortune, Red-Haired Xuan did not notice their arrival. He went on discussing the peach blossom star and bombarding the fortune teller with questions. Will I be rich one day, or will I only have an empty reputation? You will not exactly be rich, but you will live in comfort and style. The prediction set Xuan thinking and dreaming. When he was 9 years old, he had been sent to live with a distant uncle. His uncle treated him as an unpaid servant, yet the entire extended family praised the man for taking care of his orphaned nephew. One day, however, Xuan received a terrible beating and was thrown out. His aunt had been bathing, and he had made a hole in the bamboo wall so that he could watch her. From that time onward, the street corners and doorways became Xuan's home. The dracontomelon fruit he picked from trees and the fish he caught in Hoan Kiem Lake became his meals. He had sold peanuts and newspapers, carried advertising flags for theaters, hawked patent medicines aboard trains, and practiced several other minor trades. The sun had turned his hair red, like that of a European. Such circumstances had made him entirely uneducated, although he was extremely cunning and knew the ways of the world. Only about a year earlier, he had found employment as a ball boy at the tennis club. He had quickly learned to play rather well, and so both the French and Vietnamese members had grown fond of him and treated him with a little consideration. His dream was that one day, if good fortune brought him a sponsor, he might become as celebrated as Chim or Jiao. For the moment, he was content to remain a ball boy. It might be a humble profession, but at least it offered some hope of fame. Selling peanuts, climbing trees for fruit, fishing and running through the streets with advertising flags could lead nowhere. The sporting movement and the movement of the common people sometimes filled him with the most extraordinary pride. Looking at my face, master, do you think I'll rise in the world? The fortune teller carefully examined the red hair, the flat forehead, the large jaw, the long groove above the upper lip, and the full ears. He nodded thoughtfully. Very promising. Your later years will be excellent. It is only a pity that your hair is not black. Damn it, I've never owned a hat in my life. Of course my hair's turned red. Suddenly, one of the small boys came running out of the tennis club and shouted, Xuan, aren't you coming in? The young mistress is here. There's nobody to help them. Why don't you come? Which young mistress? Miss Van Min, the one married to that man we nicknamed the Beanpole. Madame Deputy Duan has come to watch too. She even wants to play. Red-haired Xuan stood up and instructed the fortune teller. Just keep writing. I'll collect it this evening or tomorrow. Remember, I've already paid you. Now, off I go to play tennis with the beauty and give that peach blossom star something to do. As he passed the sugarcane seller, Xuan smiled seductively and winked. Au revoir, see you tomorrow. Then he ran into the court on the left, where the three newcomers were waiting. Your servant, most honorable madame, sir, madame. Mr. and Mrs. Van Min responded with slight bows, but Madame Deputy Douane scowled. The young wife laughed and glanced at her husband. "My aunt doesn't like that sort of ceremony," he told Juan. Madame Deputy Douane immediately began scolding him. "You really are stupid. Most honorable madame, indeed. I'm only old enough to be your mother. To deserve a title like that, I'd have to be old enough to have given birth to your mother. And as for your mother..." "My apologies, madame. I misspoke. Please forgive me." Once the anger of a genuine métis, a Vietnamese woman married to a Frenchman, had cooled, Xuan took a racket and ran onto the court. Pop, pop, pop. The ball flew back and forth. The sight of young Madame Van Min's smooth white thighs caused Juan to miss his first few shots. It also gave the young woman the illusion that she had become a much better player. Still seething, Madame Deputy Douane grumbled, "These Annamites really are stupid." The lanky young man answered, "Why bother yourself over people of that kind, aunt? I suppose I ought to take up sport too. Otherwise, I'll be old before I know it." "Oh, if that is true, then I, Van Min, endorse it with both hands. Do you really mean it, aunt? You wish to practice sport, a triumph for athletics, a step forward for Vietnam, the strengthening of the race." He spoke with all the fervor typical of thin, sickly men who had never practiced any sport themselves, but were constantly urging others to do so. The reason was that he had returned from studying in France without obtaining a single diploma. Apparently, while in France, he had been the intimate friend of politicians who later became deputy ministers, celebrated writers, and so forth. Famous men whose names were occasionally mentioned even by the Vietnamese newspapers. The colonial security police assigned 2 detectives to follow him. After 3 months of relentless investigation, the only secret activity the detectives discovered was that he smoked Camel cigarettes. Later, he married a wealthy woman. Once married, he began calling himself Van Min. The security police were alarmed once again. After another long investigation, they finally learned that his wife's name was Van and his own was Min. He had simply combined the 2 names into Van Min, which also meant civilization, placing his wife's name first and his own beneath it as a gallant gesture toward the lady. That was all. He was involved in no opposition movement, reform movement, nationalism, internationalism, or anything else whatsoever. Once enough people had begun calling him Van Min. However, he felt obliged to champion the Westernization movement, lest his new name become meaningless. A healthy soul in a healthy body. Having discovered this profound truth, he enthusiastically promoted sport wherever he went, first to his wife, and then to everyone else. He himself played no sport and took no exercise because he had no time. His program for the Westernization of the nation kept him perpetually lost in deep and solemn thought. The life story of Madame Deputy Douane was also rather interesting. In her youth, shortly after she had left the countryside to attend an Armistice Day celebration in the city, she was raped by a French soldier. The unlawful violation was immediately followed by a lawful one, which is to say, a wedding ceremony. That soldier later rose to become a deputy officer in the colonial douane. After they had lived together for about 10 years, the deputy douane died. He died loyal to the government, faithful to his wife, and in the manner of men who love their wives far too much. Madame Deputy Douane then married a young Vietnamese clerk. 2 years later, this native husband also dropped dead. Since no one had ever actually seen her with a lover, poisonous tongues spread the rumor that the flames of passion kindled by all the men who had failed to possess her had been left for her unfortunate clerk of a husband to extinguish by himself. She was so virtuous and faithful that her husband, drained of all strength and vitality, had been forced to flee into the peace of the grave. Two French girls and a Vietnamese young man entered the court. Red-Haired Xuân surrendered his racket to the club members. One of the French girls went into the changing room. Xuân disappeared as well. The tennis club filled with noisy greetings, laughter, and conversation. The balls flew back and forth like a swarm of bats hunting mosquitoes in the evening sky. A short while later, a Frenchman suddenly appeared, gripping Xuân by the hair. He dragged him across the ground, slapping and cursing him. Everyone crowded around to ask what had happened. It turned out that Xuân had been caught red-handed peeping at a French girl while she removed her skirt and changed into tennis shorts. The club unanimously decided to dismiss him and withhold his wages for that month. It was then that Madame Deputy Duan realized that the Vietnamese were not merely stupid, they were also deserving of compassion. She sighed sorrowfully and said to her nephew-in-law, "Who among us has never done something foolish in their youth? The proper thing is to forgive. Why be so harsh with the young man? How miserable, how pitiful! How can they possibly bring themselves to throw him out like that?" And that concludes Chapter 1 of Dumb Luck. The story continues in Chapter 2. If you would like to follow the rest of the novel, please consider subscribing. Thank you very much for listening.